Often viewers of my videos ask me for recommendations about introductory wargames. They want to get started with wargaming, they do not know where to start from. Well, so then today I've decided to make a video about a classic introductory wargame. Well, one that definitely would work as your first wargame if you're ever interested in trying out this style of gaming. But also it is an introductory wargame that has enough meat and enough challenges, enough ideas in it that you can still play it even after you have become a proficient wargamer. It is certainly a light game, but one that is worth playing even not as an introductory wargame only. This game is Napoleon at Waterloo. It is an SPA design from back when. It was published several decades ago now. Wow, time flies. And it was originally intended as an introductory wargame. It had been designed specifically to introduce new players to the better side of gaming. Napoleon at Waterloo nowadays is available for print and play. You can find the files online, you can make your own copy, so that is also great because you can try your first war game without having to spend much. Also, it is not a game that requires so much work to assemble. You simply need to print two pages that make the map, and then you have to print and cut the counters, but you do not have many of those. Counters have two stats. One is combat strength, the other one is movement. Cavalry and infantry tend to have different stats. Infantry is stronger, cavalry is faster, but they're not functionally different from one another. Artillery, however, is different in that it is allowed to bombard the enemies, that is, to launch a special attack from a distance. The situation at the beginning of the game is the one that you see here, thanks to the printed setup. When you set up the game, you look at the numbers printed in the middle of each counter, and that tells you the axis in which you place the counter. But as you can see, there are also symbols on the map to indicate where units go. So I do not need to set up the game to show you that this is the area where the French units set up. And this is the area that they will leave to push against the Allies. Only British units are on the map at the beginning of the game. There is a group of Prussian units that is ready to enter the game in turn 3. They will enter from this edge here, and well, they will join the fight and make things harder for the French player. In this game, you win by demoralizing the opponent, which you do by destroying 40 strength points of enemy units. The ally player wins by destroying 40 points of French units, 40 strength points. For the French player, things are a little trickier because the French player still needs to destroy 40 points of combat strength belonging to the ally player, but also needs to exit 7 units from one of these hexes here that have an arrow. That means that the French player is forced to be the attacker here is forced to push against the enemy line and to go towards that area, while at the same time inflicting as much damage as possible on the enemy. And things can be tricky if, for example, the British player decides to move and retreat a little bit. That is to delay the initial confrontation with the French. That will give time to the Prussian units to enter the fight and very often to outflank the French player. On the other hand, the French player can concentrate on this area, so can start opening a way to exit the board from here and can create a front from which to attack the Anglo-Prussian units. Such that there are challenges and decisions and conundrums for both sides. This is a game that, for such a small map and such a simple map and such a simple set of rules, as I will explain in a bit, really has a lot of interesting things to it, a lot of interesting challenges for both sides. But talking about the rules, turn structure is very simple. First, the French player moves any and all of his units up to the full movement allowance of each unit. That is the number, that is the movement allowance. Each hex costs a single movement point to enter, but when you move adjacent to an enemy unit, you enter the zone of control of that unit and your movement is over for that turn. Not only that, but you cannot leave that hex before combat is resolved. That means that actually combat effects are the only way in which two units that are in each other's zone of control can detach from each other. So first movement, that will be interrupted by entering enemy zones of control. Then combat, the French player will resolve combat. All units that are in an enemy zone of control must attack the enemy that is projecting a zone of control on them. After that combat phase, the game goes to the opponent, to the ally player, who goes through the same very simple procedure. Movement followed by combat. After that, you go to the next turn, and you continue like this until turn 10, in which, well, if by that time neither player has met victory conditions, the game ends in a draw. Movement, as I said, very basic. Combat follows one of the most traditional combat systems ever designed in wargaming, which is the system based on combat odds. Suppose that we have these two French units attacking that British unit. Well, when you're attacking, you compute the total combat strength of the attacker, you divide it by the combat strength of the defender. Suppose that they're both attacking that, so 4 to 4. The ratio is 1 to 1. Then you look at the combat result table, which is there. You roll a die, you cross-reference the result of the die with the appropriate column, in that case it would be 1 to 1, and you simply find and apply the result, which may be attacker retreats, defender retreats, units that receive that result retreat by 1 hex, and if they retreat in an enemy zone of control they are destroyed. Or another result may be attacker eliminated or defender eliminated, which can be pretty brutal if you have a large number of units that receives that result. And, well, yeah, it can be pretty much either or, all or nothing. Especially because in this game you do not have step reduction. You do not have units that have multiple steps and they lose a step because of a combat result, but they're still in the fight even though they're weakened. No, either you retreat or force the opponent to retreat, or you destroy the opponent, or you are destroyed. Units are at full strength, or they don't exist at all. Brutal, bloody, but it works, because after all, the eliminated results are not so easy to come by. For most of the time, you're pushing your opponent around, you're trying to gain position. You will take advantage of position to destroy enemy units by forcing them to retreat into your own zone of some control. And occasionally, yes, you will also be able to destroy enemy units thanks to an eliminated result. But that will not happen every turn. At least that's not what happens in my experience. Artillery units can join attacks with other units, or they can attack independently, and they can attack enemies that are up to 2 hexes away, as long as there is a line of sight that is not interrupted by units or terrain features. And this is it, really. This is pretty much what the game is about. Move, attack as the French player, move, attack as the ally player, resolve all combat, move to the next turn. repeat the procedure. As I said, this is not a game that is about complexity of the rules, but it is about an interesting situation, a situation that we all know from history, we're all curious about, and here you have a way to experience an immersion in that circumstance, in that event, without having to worry too much, without having to worry at all, really, about rules, because rules are so simple that I cannot imagine any gamer, even a casual gamer, having any problem mastering the rules. But mastering the design, again, that is a completely different conversation, because this is a design that is tricky. Just the way the buildings are, and the buildings offer defensive advantages. A defender has his combat strength doubled when being in a building. Well, the defensive advantages that the buildings grant, the position of the forest hexes, those hexes are usually impassable unless you're moving in a road, through a road, and that means that sometimes you can anchor the flanks of your line to these three axes. There are just many ways in which this terrain, even though so unassuming and on a map that looks so Spartan by today's standards, well, these terrain features really offer a lot of opportunities that the players will have a lot of fun figuring out how to exploit, and also they will have a couple of headaches trying to figure out how to overcome the ways in which the opponent is using those features. The game even comes with some variant rules, ways in which you can experiment with different systems of reinforcement. What I explained earlier, with the Prussian units entering in turn 3 and the French player having no reinforcements, that is just the main scenario, but there are other scenarios that you can try. The rules even encourage you to start tweaking things around and to try your own scenarios. Also, probably because this is a game that is so simple, so lean on the rules. Indeed, it is a game that is not intimidating, that you do not feel afraid doing things starting from the design. You don't spend a year and a half just learning the game, and then, well, you spend so much time learning it that you want to do it well, by the book. Quite the contrary. This is a game about the experience of moving units on the map, trying out new things, experimenting different strategies, being able to play multiple games in a single session, being able to play an historical war game with a player that never played a war game before. There are a lot of advantages in this design, not the least of which being that the game is for free. You can make your own copy, just get the files online. The page of the game on BoardGameGeek has the instructions, has the link that will direct you to where you can find the files to make your own copy. Napoleon at Waterloo, this game has been an introductory war game for quite some time now, and I can totally see the reasons for that being the case. There's a very good design, a design that I definitely recommend printing, putting together, and playing. There's a lot of fun to be had here, a lot of non-threatening good experiences that a newer gamer can have starting from this design, so definitely something worth trying.